Good afternoon. The first item of business this afternoon is portfolio questions, and the portfolio this afternoon is education and skills. And question number 1, I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I say how good it is to see the entire ministerial team here today for this session to ask the Scottish Government which of the portfolio questions taken in the Chamber on the 24th of April 2025 raise matters that fall within the specific responsibilities of the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, as listed on the Scottish Government website, in light of reported concerns about her missing this session for reasons not related to her ministerial duties.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
Presiding Officer, the written question as drafted cited the 25th of April 2025, which of course was a Friday, and the Scottish Parliament does not sit on a Friday. But all of the education and skills questions taken on Thursday, the 24th of April, were answered by a Minister from the Education and Skills portfolio.
Douglas Ross.
Sorry, that's a very specific question. There were issues in the Cabinet Secretary alone's portfolio on teachers who were experiencing physical violence and verbal abuse, vaping in schools and teachers stuck on temporary contracts. And if this Cabinet Secretary is going to be honest with this Chamber, she will say she was on the stump for SNP votes when she should have been here doing her job. So will Jenny Gilruth, not in her usual condescending way, give an apology to this Parliament for missing this session, but more importantly, an apology to our pupils, our parents and our teachers for the disrespect she showed by missing it?
Before I ask the Cabinet Secretary to rise to respond to that, I would just remind members of the requirement to treat each other in a courteous manner. Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, as set out in Rule 13.7 of the Parliament's Standing Orders, oral questions may be answered by any member of the Scottish Government or a junior minister. Now, Mr Ross had the opportunity today to raise any issue pertinent to the children and young people of Scotland. What a pity, although not surprising, that he chose not to do so.
Point of order, Douglas Ross.
Yes, here we go to the SNP members who don't want to see
Mr Ross, if you have a point of order, please now
I do have
proceed
a point
with
of order.
it. Thank you.
Presiding Officer, the question submitted was very specific, to ask the Cabinet Secretary which of the questions at the previous session, which she missed to campaign for SNP votes, she would have answered if she was here. Does the Cabinet Secretary either not know which questions she would have answered, or is she deliberately misleading this Parliament by not telling us?
I thank Mr Ross for his contribution. It's not clear to me that's a point of order because, of course, the Chair is not responsible for the substance of ministerial responses. And I would intend to leave that there because I'm sure the member is entirely aware of that fact. And with that, I would call, by way of a supplementary, Gordon MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Cabinet Secretary appreciate the hypocrisy of Douglas Ross questioning anyone's attendance at Parliament, given he previously ditched the Justice Committee to officiate a football match between Sporting Lisbon and Real Madrid, and missed a universal credit debate at Westminster to be at Barcelona via Olympiacos? And can she remind the Chamber the process by which parliamentary questions are answered?
Mr MacDonald, I think one recognises that most of that question had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the remit of the Cabinet Secretary, and I will not be suggesting that the Cabinet Secretary responds. I always hope that members might have some questions that they would wish to ask that do fall within the Cabinet Secretary's remit. This afternoon we have a supplementary. Pam Duncan-Clancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. One matter in the Cabinet Secretary's portfolio that was raised in her absence on the 24th of April was on teachers stuck on temporary contracts. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary two things? With 97% of people surveyed saying they believe a lack of permanent jobs in teaching is harming pupils, why on earth on her watch are there so many newly qualified teachers in a cycle of temporary contracts, leaving them in limbo and pupils facing a revolving door in staff? And secondly, can I ask the Cabinet Secretary, why was campaigning more important than this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Thank the member for her question. Of course, MSPs take decisions around where they are on a daily basis. I note, of course, her leader was not here earlier in the week for the assisted dying debate. Instead, he chose to be in Hamilton campaigning. But to the substantive point the member asks in relation to funding for teacher permanence, which is an important issue, of course, the Scottish Government put forward a budget in which we uplifted the value provided to our local authorities for teacher numbers to £186.5 million and we provided additionality by way of £29 million for additional support needs, and that was to support extra teaching posts, because we recognise there are challenges in that regard. And I have to observe, of course, that the Labour Party abstained on the Scottish Government's budget.
And brief supplementary, Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. What message does the Education Secretary think that playing truant from Parliament, because she believes she had something better to do, sends to the children she's imploring to attend our schools?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his question. I would also have to point out, of course, that I sincerely missed Stephen Kerr's presence at the Education, Children and Young People's Committee on the evening of the 30th of April, where he was due to present his own amendments on the Education Bill. I'm sure that members will recall that instead Mr Briggs spoke on behalf of Mr Kerr to answer any questions, much in the same way that ministers were able to represent the education portfolio.
Right, I think it's time to move on to question number 2. Claire Hockey.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the work that it's doing to support those affected by historic forced adoption.
Minister Natalie Dawn-Innes.
I would first highlight that this Government issued a national apology in 2023 for the lifelong suffering experienced by those affected by historic forced adoption. These practices should not have happened, and it is right that we listen to the experiences of mothers and adoptees who continue to feel the impact. The First Minister recently met with the Movement for Adoption Apology Scotland and committed to exploring the potential for an oral history project. This would offer a space for sharing and proper recording of personal testimonies, acknowledging the past and providing wider societal recognition and education.
Claire Hockey.
I thank the Minister for that answer. Last week, campaigners for the Movement for Adoption Apology Scotland held an event sponsored by my colleague Marie McNair. Many of those affected by historic adoption practices have already passed, and so the need for urgent action is imperative. As the Minister referenced in her previous answer, one of their key asks of the Scottish Government is to fund an oral history gathering, an issue, as she said, that they discussed with the First Minister at their recent meeting. Can the Minister advise me what the Scottish Government's response is to that call for the oral history gathering?
Minister.
Yes, of course. As I mentioned in my previous answer, the First Minister has committed in writing to the MAA to exploring that oral history project. He's asked officials to work with campaign groups, including the MAA, stakeholders and people with lived experience, to discuss how best to take forward the work and to agree some timescales. My officials have already been in touch with the MAA around this.
And supplementary, Bans Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As one of the MSPs who campaigned on this over the last 8 years, I did welcome the national apology. But since then, victims and survivors have lost faith in limited progress made by the Scottish Government. In Northern Ireland, for example, they have established a Truth Recovery independent panel which reported interim findings in May of 2024. Can I ask the Minister, are the Scottish Government mindful to establish the same in Scotland? And following these meetings which the First Minister has held, when will Parliament receive an update?
Minister.
Let me be clear, I extend my deepest sympathies to all those that have been affected by these practices, and what I would say is most important is that we listen to those people with experience. We have listened to people with lived experience, and our response to that is based on this engagement. This includes peer support for those affected, lived experience sessions, funding a service to help individuals and families to connect, and better information and awareness raising. And this is on top of the further work that I've already alluded to at the FM's request. Mr Briggs asked for a timescale around this, and this is underway. I'm more than happy to respond to Mr Briggs once that's been finalised.
Question number 3, Stephanie Callaghan, who is joining us remotely.
To ask the Scottish Government regarding the provision of vocational skills training, whether it will provide an update on its response to the 2025 Climate Exchange Report, training provision in Scotland's onshore wind and solar industries.
Minister Graham Day.
Presiding Officer, in June 2024 we commissioned a skills research project with the aim of quantifying existing provision of skills development and training within the onshore wind and solar industries in Scotland, and the final report was published on the Climate Exchange website in February 2025. The Government took part in an industry-led roundtable in February to consider the findings of the report, and we're currently working with industry to take forward the recommendations and to enhance skills and training provision across Scotland, which will help support the supply of skilled workers required to meet our net zero ambitions.
Stephanie Callaghan.
I'm grateful for that response. The report shows that meeting Scotland's 2045 net zero target requires major growth in the sector and highlights the need for a versatile workforce with a broad skill set that can work across different energy sectors. To the Scottish Government's credit, the report recognises the breadth of allied STEM training provision in Scotland, but notes that much of it's theoretical, lacking practical training. With a peak in skills demand coming as early as 2027, the report strongly recommends urgent collaboration across government, industry and educational institutions to produce a comprehensive action plan that will allow initiatives to launch in time for the start of the 2025 academic year. So can the Minister provide an update on preparations for the 2025 academic year and offer assurances that colleges and training providers have the resources they need to deliver on practical training that ensures graduates are work ready?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I very much welcome the piece of work that's been done, because we have been able to benefit from a similar, very detailed piece of work that was done by SOEC, assessing skill shortages for offshore wind. Because identifying skill shortages and drawing a distinction between these and labour shortages is the very foundation of how we will take this forward. And the benefit of having that information could be seen in the recent budget, where in conjunction with the Lib Dems and Greens, we're delivering funding aimed at increasing capacity in the college sector to meet skills demand for offshore activity. Now we have the Climate Exchange final report. That will help training providers and government to consider how we meet the demand, which goes, as we've seen, it's been identified beyond trade-type skills and covers things such as project management and finance. But I did note the findings on solar, which indicated the need for more people rather than addressing an actual skill shortage, or at least access to skilled training. And in terms of getting our training offering better aligned with the needs of the economy, in all areas of green skills, we're engaged actively with a number of colleges on curriculum transformation to enable them to focus activity on the areas they deem most important to their localities for the national economy. I would also say to the member that I'm looking into an issue brought to me by the sector around impediments to their making fuller use of green skills training resources, particularly around solar, in order to meet changing demand from industry.
Question number 4, Liam MacArthur.
To ask the Scottish Government what engagement it is undertaken with the education sector in island communities such as Orkney, which are reportedly seeing increasing pressures around funding and staff retention, particularly in relation to the provision of additional support for learning.
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the recruitment and deployment of teachers is a responsibility of local authorities. We have engaged with a number of councils, including Orkney, in recent weeks to discuss education workforce planning and their plans to restore teacher numbers to 2023 levels as part of our agreement with local government. We are providing councils with increased funding of £186.5 million this year to support this commitment, and we are also investing a further £29 million for local and national programmes to help employ more specialist staff and teachers and to support national initiatives for recruiting and training ASN teachers.
Liam MacArthur.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response? Yesterday, the Government agreed to undertake a national review into the implementation of mainstreaming policy and the availability of specialist additional support places across local authorities. In Orkney, there are no specialist schools, and teachers report increasing barriers to delivery of ASL, especially where children have more complex support needs. Any review of mainstreaming policy must consider the specific circumstances of island communities such as Orkney, where all children with additional support needs are provided for in mainstream education. These schools desperately need targeted support to facilitate the delivery of effective ASL. So, as such, will the Cabinet Secretary agree to visit Orkney to meet with the local education sector to get a clearer understanding of the challenges faced by teachers and staff, as well as the support needed to improve access to ASL for pupils?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for the question. I'm happy to give him confirmation that I would be very keen to visit Orkney. I know that my officials on the Monday of this week actually met with officials in Orkney, and the Council highlighted the increase they are seeing in the number of children and young people with an identified additional support need. I know that they are very much focused on supporting their teachers to develop their skills and confidence in supporting those children and young people. And obviously, the Government is providing some support through the Kirkwall ASN Centre in Orkney, which is receiving funding from the Learning Estate and Investment Programme. But I'm more than happy to undertake to visit Orkney, along with Mr MacArthur, to learn more about the approach in island communities.
Question number 5, Oliver Mantell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it's taking to ensure those identified with dyslexia at school leave education with the appropriate supporting information needed to secure reasonable adjustments in the workplace.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Oliver Mundell for raising this important issue, which he has championed through the Dyslexia Cross-Party Group. We are giving careful consideration to Dyslexia Scotland's passport proposal that they and Oliver Mundell raised with the First Minister in November of last year. And I'd be happy to keep members and Mr Mundell and the cross-party group informed of progress to that end. In addition, we will continue to work with Dyslexia Scotland and local government partners to improve the consistency of early identification of dyslexia in schools, and we will continue to encourage employers to consider reasonable adjustments for employees with dyslexia.
Oliver Mundell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Obviously, some time has passed since November, and I think there is frustration within the dyslexia community at the length of time that is taking to move some of those proposals forward, and also the fact that after years of asking, the Scottish Government still hasn't identified a lead official when it comes to adult dyslexia. Is that something the Cabinet Secretary will look into?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm happy to do so. Actually, for Mr Mundell's understanding, I met with Dyslexia Scotland recently and discussed this exact issue. I'd be more than happy to engage with him and with Dyslexia Scotland to give him an update alongside officials, because I think he raises a hugely important point. He will recognise there is to some extent an overlap between responsibilities in the health portfolio and education here, but it's important they're working together. And actually that was a key theme that came from yesterday's debate on additional support needs, having a more coherent approach to how we can support people. So I'm happy to take that away and to offer that engagement with the member and Dyslexia Scotland.
Supplementary, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's vital that pupils with dyslexia are supported to reach their full potential. So can the Cabinet Secretary please outline how the GTC Scotland Professional Recognition in Dyslexia and Inclusive Practice teacher training programme is supporting teachers to do this?
Cabinet Secretary.
The GTCS accredited Dyslexia and Inclusive Practice programme supports teaching professionals in Scotland to be well equipped to identify and support learners with dyslexia, and also to share their learning with colleagues. It's a very popular programme which saw a record number of teachers participate last year. The programme's modules have a very strong focus on the dyslexia identification process and supports that can be put in place in our schools. We are also committed to building on the success of programmes such as this through our additional investment of £29 million this year to support the ASM workforce.
And supplementary, Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her approach today with regard to dyslexia, because it's a very important condition that a significant number of young people suffer from. Could the Scottish Government look at where dyslexia has not been diagnosed during school life, but a positive destination is registered for that individual, and whether or not actually it should be a positive destination, given that there's been a miss of that diagnosis of dyslexia? I recognise it crosses a number of different portfolios, but I have had concerns raised with me with individuals who subsequently have found out they're in a positive destination, but they're not because they've been diagnosed with dyslexia and they now need additional support.
Cabinet Secretary.
I think, Presiding Officer, the member raises an important point. I'll give him a commitment today that I will take that away from the Chamber to engage with officials on how we might be able to extrapolate that data. Obviously, we gather data in relation to positive destinations on leaving school, and then I think on 9 months later as well, on follow-up destinations. So I'll take the member's issue away from the Chamber today and engage with him further and with my officials.
Question number 6, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on how many school pupils are currently studying computing science and how this compares to recent years.
Cabinet Secretary.
In 2024, there were a total of 12,049 entries into computing science qualifications at National 4, National 5, Higher and Advanced Higher. That's an increase of 282 entries over this parliamentary session since 2021. Computing science is, of course, only one of the computing and IT-related courses taken by young people in schools, such as computer games development, business with information technology, PC passports and cyber security. There were a total of 6,828 entries into these wider vocational and technical courses in computing and IT-related subjects in 2024, an increase of 2,706 compared to 2021.
Willie Coffey.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? When I graduated in computer science years ago in 1980, we had some idea of the power of computing and software to change the world we live in for the better, but we still seem to struggle to attract the numbers of young people the industry needs to study computing science and to become software developers, especially young women. Could the Cabinet Secretary offer some insight into how the Government can help with this issue and to make young people more aware of the fabulous careers that are available in software development, the ability to work worldwide, and not to mention the very high salaries that can be enjoyed in an industry that is truly world-changing?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his question, and he raises a pertinent issue in relation to the gender divide in terms of subject choice in our schools, and we have a range of activity underway to help support more girls in choosing computing science. Education Scotland is working with national organisations including Tech She Can and Code Club to promote female role models through live lessons and professional learning for teachers. There was also a very successful Women in Computing event which was run by St George's School. I was pleased to attend that last year, and it was held in collaboration with industry partners that involved 500 pupils. We're exploring whether similar events could be offered all over Scotland, and in addition the Government has provided £800,000 to the Scottish Teachers Advancing Computing Science organisation to support that organisation in promoting computer science.
Supplementary, Stephen Kerr.
Can I just say how touching it was to hear how much the Cabinet Secretary had missed me at the committee meeting on the education bill. But there is a problem. But there is a problem with the number of computing teachers, and it's been pointed out repeatedly that there's a ticking time bomb when it comes to the ageing demographic of those who are currently teaching, and there's no apparent pipeline to replace them. And with only 3 universities offering PGDEs in computing, 2 in Glasgow, why has the Government failed to expand access to training? And will the Minister act now, or the Cabinet Secretary, I beg your pardon, act now to address this recruitment crisis before it fatally undermines Scotland's digital economy?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for his question. I don't know if he's aware of the pilot we're supporting at Aberdeen University, which speaks to the essence, I think, of his question. That pilot programme is really focused on expanding our profession in relation to computing science, where we know there are challenges. It's a 2-year MA secondary course that has been designed to allow students with the relevant HND qualifications to convert into teaching, and the first cohort of that course is due to start in September 2025, and the first cohort will complete in 2027. So the course is still open for applications via the UCAS website, so I'd encourage members, including Mr Kerr, to help to raise awareness. We've provided funding to that actually from the economy portfolio, recognising the point the member makes in relation to wider workforce challenges and ensuring that there is that pipeline of talent feeding into the system.
And supplementary, Willie Rennie.
Stephen Kerr is right that there is a significant challenge with computing science teachers. It's down at a record low of 550, and there's been a drop this last year of 28. Now, there are some incentives in place to encourage people to switch careers, but they're clearly insufficient. So is the Cabinet Secretary considering other measures to encourage more people into computing science? Because it is essential.
Cabinet Secretary.
I think I agree with the essence of the member's point. Again, it links to wider challenges we have, not least in computing, but across the curriculum, actually, there are a number of skills gaps in certain subject areas. We do, I think the member was alluding to in his question, fund the Teaching Bursary programme, which is worth up to £20,000. However, the success of that, I think, in recent years has dwindled, and we are reflecting on how that might be able to better support these subject gaps in future. To that end, I can give the member confirmation that I have asked my officials for more advice on that, because I think it is important that the programmes we have encouraging people into teaching are helping to drive recruitment, particularly in areas where we know we have subject gaps, such as computing science.
Question number 7, Sharon Darby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to tackle any violence against teachers and school staff in South Ayrshire.
Cabinet Secretary.
Violence towards pupils or school staff is completely unacceptable, and responsibility for addressing concerns in terms of specific responsibility rests with local authority areas and the employer of school staff as local authorities. In August, we published our action plan on relationships and behaviour in schools jointly with COSLA. The plan set out 20 actions to be taken by 2027, including actions to reduce violence in our schools. Last week, I updated Parliament on the positive progress made so far, including our intention to publish in the coming weeks new guidance to support school staff in responding to behaviour, including the use of consequences.
Sharon Dowie.
Thank you. The number of reported assaults and verbal abuse against teachers and support staff in South Ayrshire has nearly tripled since before the pandemic. This violence is disrupting learning, demoralising staff and driving experienced teachers out of the profession. At January's cross-party summit, young people made it clear too often there are no real consequences for those responsible. Cabinet Secretary, what immediate action is the Scottish Government taking to protect school staff and ensure there are real consequences for violent behaviour in our classrooms?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for her question. Both Ms Dowie and I attended the first summit, I think that was held earlier this year, and the evidence we heard from young people and their parents particularly, I found extremely harrowing. And we had, I thought, a very helpful cross-party discussion around about the route forward. The issue in relation to consequences is continuing, I think, to be challenging in our schools. There are a variety of different measures that teachers can take in terms of action. But of course, at the extreme, there is the opportunity for teachers to exclude. And the issue that Ms Dowie raises, which is so pertinent, is the challenge between, on the one hand, an increase in some challenging behaviour in our schools, and on the other hand, exclusion rates that seem to be falling. So I've been very clear in my communication in the Chamber, but also in my engagement with schools, that we encourage teachers to report incidents as and when they happen, and to use exclusion if they see that that is fit. Now, the National Action Plan, which updated, I think, a few weeks ago now, sets out a range of different actions we have taken. But in my statement to Parliament last week, I also said that I would come back to Parliament to provide a further update in relation to consequences. So I hope that gives the member some reassurance in that regard.
And supplementary, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the Cabinet Secretary share my concerns at the experiences of female teachers and support staff who can be subjected to misogynistic abuse? And can she outline what steps the Government is taking to tackle this?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, female teachers, like female politicians, face misogyny, and I think that is reflective actually of changes in our society more broadly. We published a national framework for schools to help tackle sexual harassment and gender-based violence in March of last year. And misogynistic behaviour has been identified as an emerging concern within schools, and this framework really helps to demonstrate our commitment to taking swift action to respond to current concerns. The Programme for Government also, though, commits us to supporting the Digital Discourse Initiative, which provides support and advice to navigate digital media and counter the impacts of disinformation and online hate. I'm delighted that we've been able to support the first stage of this work to help teachers and learners with skills to tackle this issue.
Question number 8 has not been lodged, so that concludes portfolio questions on education and skills, and there will be a point of order from Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I acknowledge what you said in response to my earlier point of order, that you are not responsible for the answers from the Cabinet Secretary. However, later on the same question, you did rule out a supplementary question as inadmissible because it wasn't linked to the first question. Therefore, if you are able to control questions that are asked but not answers, what avenue is available to MSPs to get a response to a lodged question? And since the Cabinet Secretary point-blank refused to tell me in response to my question which questions she would have answered when she was absent on the 24th of April, I have now lodged a written question to seek that information. What can you do from the Chair to urge the Cabinet Secretary to urgently answer that written question?
I thank Mr Ross for his further contribution. What I would say is that, of course, I am here to ensure that the proceedings can continue. So if that's a portfolio question, the questions can be asked, that supplementaries can be taken. Obviously, as regards supplementaries, as all members know, the supplementary must be supplemental to, firstly, supplemental to the question on the business bulletin, and secondly, within the remit of the Cabinet Secretary's portfolio. I hope that deals with that point. I didn't think I needed to explain that. But on the other point that the member raises, I have said repeatedly, and the member will know, that it is not up to the Chair as to the nature of a minister's response. The minister has responded. If the member feels unhappy with a minister's response, the member is well aware of the number of different ways in which the member can pursue the substantive issues, should he so wish. And I hope that clarifies the matter. Thank you. And that concludes, as I say, portfolio questions, and there will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Thank you very much.